Let's get hyped. Welcome into the Husker247 HypeCast. Just 2 more games promised this season, but maybe a third could be lurking out there if Nebraska finds that coveted 6th win. Could it be this weekend against Wisconsin? Let's find out as I welcome in Michael Brunch, Brian Christopherson, Husker247. Gentlemen, welcome back. And our guests this week, we have completed the 1620 the zone chart. We have had everyone on at this point in time from 1620 the zone. It's getting so bad we might even have Nick Grimm on as our guest for Iowa week. No, we will not be doing that. But Connor Happer, welcome. You're the last of the 1620 guys on here.
Well, thank you. It's appreciated. I'm glad that we finally got here. I think we did the first game last year.
I usually let you pick your game. I usually know who I'm going to go to for at least a few games a year. And so I kind of want to see what games people want to talk about. And you wanted to go right off the bat. You wanted Minnesota.
Yeah. And that's what we did. I don't think we got anything right in that game. But
we thought the defense would play well.
Well, they kind of did, I guess, except for that touchdown drive at the end of the game. But this is a different time. Times are much better, right?
They got more wins than they did when they played that game.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I'm excited to be here, though. I feel very hype. Don't you feel there's like a sense of renewal a little bit with the introduction of Dana Holgorsen this week?
We got a little Holgorsen bump, I think.
Yeah.
The press conference.
Just like last week?
He did give us the bump last week, but then yesterday Tuesday when he came in and said these wide receivers, these are big guys, these are big fellows, you got to freaking block, dudes. Why does it look like crap? I think people like that. So the bluntness, I think, gave it another surge.
So people want more straight shooting.
They liked it. So
the tag team of Rule kind of preaching from the pulpit, and then you get Dana Holgorsen just coming in from the side, just sidearming everything, talking straight. That could work really well for people.
With some red zone touchdowns, maybe, if they could get a few of those.
I think people would love the red zone touchdowns.
Yeah.
I think that would be appreciated by almost everyone. Brunch, you've been awfully quiet. Would you like to say anything?
No, I'm just getting I'm looking at the super system on the other screen here to see what we're going to go with the oddly specific predictions. So I'm dialed. I'm ready for the last 2 games.
Some prediction involving some tight end somewhere. Somebody will have it.
Yeah,
he's kind of reined it in. I think there's only been 6 tight end predictions this year.
That's pretty good.
I think he's giving up hope a little bit. Brunts needs something to bring him back.
I deviated last week and sure hit the hell out of that one, didn't I?
I was waiting. I got a text from you right after that happened. You told me you were going to be unbearable, obnoxious. You were going to give everybody what you had, all the barrels, and this is what it is.
We're not there yet. We're not to oddly specific predictions yet, but it's coming.
You got your wind horse fingers going.
Yep.
That's it. All right. Well, let's dive into it. As we do, we will start on the offensive side of the ball. And as we do, we will start with our guest. Connor Happer, you heard from Dana Holgorsen. What was your biggest takeaway of what he had to say? And do you expect anything to look slightly different the second week than what we saw against USC last week?
I sort of felt like I've been kind of out on an island this week. Like I thought they look, and it's marginal because of the production that they had. They only scored 13 points on offense, but like I thought what they were trying to do looked a little easier for them to do. Like I think you're trying to build these building blocks for Dylan Raiola to regain his confidence, and I thought they took a step toward that last week. Like he's kind of digging himself out of a hole right now. But, amidst not scoring many points and the offense, failing when given golden opportunities still, I thought there was some stuff that happened in the middle that was pretty good. You saw some quicker stuff and Dylan getting the ball out of his hands, not still consistently enough. But, yeah, I would expect a jump a little bit this week. And I was looking at the wind reports just to make sure it's not going to be like it was around here on Wednesday this week, but looks good. Looks good for Saturday. So I don't know. Maybe Dana Holgorsen gets in his bag a little bit. Dylan Raiola starts airing it out a little bit more. I do feel like there's a step to be made, like a noticeable step to be made for the offense this week.
PT, I know this because we had the conversation earlier this week. You also felt a little better about Nebraska's offense as the game was playing out, and then you looked at the numbers, and then you watched it again. I mean, what kind of stood out for you? You know, Happer was talking about it as well, but what kind of clicked for you with the offense last week, and where do you think they can build upon that?
First off, they had a rhythm. It was the plays were coming in quicker, and if you think back to some previous games, it felt like they're breaking huddle with like 10 on the play clock or 12 on the play clock, and it just you're kind of disjointed, I think, as an offense when you're like that, and I could see where it would affect play. I mentioned on our previous pod, but on the second touchdown Nebraska had where they tied it at 14, where Emmett Johnson scored on that drive. Raiola hits Banks for like a 15-yard pass. Blocking's great. Throw is on time. Route was crisp. It was just an example of something we've hardly seen, it feels like, the last month. It was a pretty standard 15-yard play, but there was something to it where I was like, all right, just more of that. Just more of that drumbeat of like consistency on those plays. It doesn't have to be over-the-top exceptional stuff here. It's just got to be solid and keep doing it. And I thought the run game was improved, even though, as Dana Holgorsen pointed out, he got after the backs and their coach a little bit, like, you're missing some holes here. We're leaving yards on the table. So I was just encouraged by the O-line and where the run game could go under Holgorsen's direction. And I also felt like there were two or three drives maybe where they're like one play from getting a lot more yards, that where Raiola slid early, or the play where he throws the interception, where a guy's well covered. Those are two drives where you could have stacked up 80 more yards and maybe some more points too. So they left that out there.
Michael Bruns, what did you make of Dylan Raiola's day as a whole against USC? Did you notice any differences from him specifically in kind of how the offense ran?
Yeah, I thought there was more rhythm, which I think has been really lacking. Basically since second half of the Illinois game. I mean, that was the last time I would say that there was any kind of true rhythm to Nebraska's passing
second half
game.
of Purdue, you could maybe argue. They had a nice second half against Purdue.
That's true. So yeah, I mean, I like that. I like they got him some easier throws. There were a couple slants that they hit that were a little bit more downfield that I liked. I'm eager to see if there's a next step here, because it feels like they've got to go a little bit more vertical in the passing game. That's still missing. It feels like you're probably going to have to involve some more guys. We didn't see much from the tight ends. I'm eager to see if that changes, but I do think, though, for a young quarterback that's been really struggling over the second half of the season, you have to at least be encouraged by what took place against USC. I mean, he still is, the first pick was excusable. He locked on the wide receiver who was clearly covered, but I'm eager to see what this kind of looks like. It's going to be tough because the one thing that Wisconsin kind of distinguishes itself on is its passing defense.
Sticking with Bruns here as we kind of work our way back through. I mean, you mentioned the passing defense. I'm curious of something else, though, with that pass defense. How do you feel like Nebraska will hold up pass rush-wise? They did a nice job in pass protection against USC. It felt like, it's been mentioned on this podcast, Dylan had time to throw. And even later in that game, when all that Nebraska is doing is dropping back to pass, he never felt like he was flushed or forced out of the pocket or anything. How do you feel like Nebraska's pass protection did last week? And then how do you think it matches up with Wisconsin?
Yeah, I think for the most part, the whole season, the pass protection has been fine. I mean, he's had time. I don't, if there's a very long list of concerns that I have on offense, and I don't I don't know that pass protection is particularly high on my list. Wisconsin's got a solid defense. They got after Oregon last week, and Nebraska's going to have to play well. But, I think especially when they've had Mazuka in there at left tackle, I think that picture has looked pretty, good enough for them to win and get some things done on offense. So it's been fine. Is there, some screen game in there? Is there more in that offense that the offensive line can contribute to? We'll see. But I think they've been fine. I mean, not spectacular, but not near the top of my list of concerns right now.
Happer, we saw kind of the best running game we've seen from Nebraska's running backs in a little bit of while, and all they really managed to do was run for like 107 yards on 19 carries, but that's sort of a revelation around these parts. What stood out to you in the running game? And then more specifically, do you think someone like Emmett Johnson deserves more touches just simply based on how he played against USC and in Dana Holgorsen's offense?
Yeah, I still like the mix. I think both of you are both of them, meaning him and Emmett Johnson and Dante Dowdell are giving you enough. I don't know about the whole change. It's not really a change of pace. You're just kind of going off the hot hand at this point, but that's okay. Like I don't need to turn around and hand it off to Emmett Johnson, 18, 25 times or anything like that. Like, I like the mix of what they're doing. And you just hope that, you make the right angles and the right reads when you get through there. I thought they ran, Holgorsen said it, hey, we need to get those guys hitting the holes a little bit harder. And it looked like they did in the second half against USC. And that's where they popped a couple against that defense. So I thought that was sort of noticeable. And you just kind of have to break some tackles and get into that next level, which I just don't know if that's there with these two backs in particular. But what they gave them against USC, that's enough. If you extrapolate that out into a game where you're running it a little bit more and you have more, time where you're kind of not fighting from behind and all of that stuff, then that should average out. And I think Nebraska should be able to get some stuff done really on both sides. When you look at Wisconsin, it's nothing really impressive, honestly, on either side of the ball that really stands out to you about what they do from like a total rankings perspective. There are a couple teams that are kind of in similar spots right now, but I don't know. I sort of kind of give the edge to Nebraska just because they it feels like they weirdly might be in a better spot right now. I don't know how that works, but I think the run game is a big part of it, and I don't know if they'll lean on it on Saturday, but I do think that picture looked better last week.
BC, one of the big discussions coming out of the Holgorsen's press conference: who's the mystery youth player?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you assuming that is going to see some more time because Dana Holgorsen saw him and wondered why he's just been hanging out and hasn't played much this year?
This isn't with inside knowledge, but two guesses based off putting clues together would be either Mekhi Nelson or Quinn Clark. Quinn Clark made the road trip to USC. That was his first time on the roster, and obviously that was since Holgorsen arrived. And then Mekhi Nelson I bring up because Holgorsen was kind of talking about the backs before he answered that, although you could leave that open to which position he meant. But a week ago, just prior to the USC game, Matt Rule said Mekhi Nelson's a dog. Like, he's a dog. We're looking at him. And so I wonder if there was something building there. So maybe one of those two guys, but that was fun that he did that. Like that was like, they should do that every week. Like a coach should come in and give like a mystery player. Like, this guy has done some things Monday, Tuesday, and he might be out there and everybody can take their guess. And it'll be like a could be a new feature on this show next year.
Yeah, I would like that. I mean, it's not quite the Guess a Random Husker Hooper that we have on our Hoops podcast, but it's in that same vein.
Guess the guy's going to get 5 to 7 snaps and make a huge deal about it.
That was the next question. What does the mystery guy actually do? How many plays is he out there? That's probably the more fun game.
Look, you want to make that your oddly specific prediction. Nobody here would be offended by such a thing.
Okay, interesting. Might hold that. We'll see.
All right. Let's jump over defense and dive into what Nebraska has going on the defensive side of the ball. We will go back to Connor Happer, and we will start with this. As you have kind of sized up this Wisconsin team, I think you sort of made the comment in your last answer, and it's right where I'm at with it too. What, if anything, scares you about Wisconsin's offense?
I mean, I've watched them a little bit this year, probably not as much as in previous years, just because they're not in like these huge.
They're not good.
Yeah, right. But they've had this crazy good home schedule with great home games this year. They played Alabama and Penn State and Oregon, all of them at home. Like I like their Tawi Walker is good, I think, but it doesn't feel like they lean into that quite as much. It's a mystery, I think, as to what they're going to be. Maybe that's their strength. What they're going to try and do this week with firing Phil Longo, at the beginning of this week. So maybe they could use that to their advantage, but ultimately it kind of does come down to personnel. They're not terribly impressive at quarterback. Nothing like we've seen before at running back. There's always one receiver that's probably going to go and kill you, and it's the same guy it was last year, and Will Pauling. So that's a guy that you have to sort of be aware of. But I don't know. I feel like Nebraska is still in there on defense, has the ability to shut a run game down, especially a run game that doesn't necessarily use the quarterback as this even an ancillary piece to it. So I guess my answer is nothing. I don't know. That feels like it'll come back to bite me at some point, but not really much on Wisconsin's offense.
I don't know that it will. All right, Brunt, I'm gonna get the special teams question out of the way early, and it's gonna be you this week. What have you made of Brian Buschini's season as a whole? I mean, it's been a little bit up and down early, and then I don't know when exactly it flipped, but it feels like he's kind of put together maybe his best year at Nebraska, and he certainly had a monster game against USC on Saturday.
He's kicking the best he has in his Nebraska career. And if you actually dig in a little bit to the numbers and kind of where he ranks all time, I mean, he's having like an elite season. Brian was reading me punting notes when we were driving from Ontario to the coast last week in California, because we know how to party. But I do think he's done a really nice job of flipping the field. I don't think he's been helped a ton by his coverage. It's interesting. Like, you look at Nebraska's net punting numbers, they're terrible, but I think he's kicked well. Like, I think he's put the ball where it's needed to go for the most part. He's had strong kicks, and he's also kind of done that under the constant gun of like, am I going to have a guy just like diving at my knees on this snap? I mean, I think that's a legitimate concern every time Nebraska drops back to punt. So I think he's done really well, considering everything, and probably is not getting the kind of run that he maybe deserves. And also, even as a holder, I mean, the snaps were really bad the first 6-7 games. I mean, you didn't know where they were going to be. You didn't know if it was going to be a ground ball, if it was going to be airmailed. And for the most part, he was able to get those down where they needed to be. And, I think has probably been a pretty good sounding board for John Hull, who's made 5 straight field goals now after a pretty rough start.
BC, I'll give you this opportunity to discuss Nebraska's secondary and kind of where things are at after a rough game against USC. We've talked about it a couple different times. It felt like there was plenty of opportunity there, but Nebraska, just for whatever reason, hasn't always been able to make plays this year when the opportunity is staring at it right in front of the face, which is wild to say in a game where they had an interception return for a touchdown right at the beginning.
Yeah, it's been disappointing because when we were back in August, I think you would have said D-line and defensive backs. You could have had a good debate about who was going to be the strength when you looked at all the veterans there. There have been moments where like Deshaun Singleton's played really well, but then there's just a play where it doesn't look good at all. And then, I think Tommy Hill has never quite been able to get back after the plantar fascia injury. The play he had on the one where they got 30 yards and set up the first touchdown. That's a play I think back in early September he probably makes easily, and it's a pick. So that's the disappointing part of this last game is you let a young quarterback or a guy making his first start for that program basically live off high risk throws all game long and not pay the penalty like he should have for it. It should have been a 3 or 4 interception game. So what do? I don't know that there's going to be a lot of personnel shifting at this point. Those guys, some of them playing their last games as Huskers in that stadium, they need to play their best brand of ball. They have to be dialed in, and on those plays where it's a 50-50 ball, they got to go get it and make Wisconsin pay when there's those type of opportunities. So I don't know how to say it. It's been disappointing, and I don't think there's a quick fix or like someone you can just throw in the lineup that's going to shift everything automatically. Guys just have to play a little bit better this week, and they got to communicate better. You can't give up in a game like this where it could be 17-14, whatever. You can't have that one play where someone's playing cover 2 and someone's playing something else. And that's what happened on the one touchdown.
Brunt, it is senior day. Nowhere will Nebraska feel that more than on their defensive side of the ball. As you kind of look through this roster, you look at the guys who are finishing up their careers, playing their last game at Memorial Stadium. Is there anybody that particularly stands out that you either really enjoyed interviewing or really enjoyed watching them play? Anything along those lines?
I think you have to appreciate John Bullock in his career at Nebraska. I mean, and I think especially so given kind of where college football is going. Matt Rule talked about this a little bit today. I mean, this is you're going to start to get into a lot fewer walk-ons that are going to make it to this point in their career just because there's not going to be space with a 105-man roster. I mean, if John Bullock was starting his career in college now, I mean, I don't think that he's at Nebraska just because of everything. This is a guy that was a defensive back for a long time, made the move to linebacker, came back for a 6th season when he wasn't sure whether he wanted to or not. And I think you just have to appreciate, guys that kind of do that, as coming through the walk-on program. It's also funny to me. I mean, you've got 5 or 6 sixth-year guys who are walking on Saturday. Bryce Benhart's official visit, the other visitors that day on his official visit were Brant Banks and Wandale Robinson. Wandale Robinson is in his 3rd NFL season right now, and Bryce Benhart is going to play in his 58th game at Nebraska. That's just an insane number of games. And it just kind of shows you how crazy the last, 4, 5, 6 years have been with, the extra years and everything else. But, Ty Robinson and Bryce Benhart have played a lot of football for Nebraska. And I don't think either of those guys are going to have records that, at least for the number of games they've played, that'll be broken anytime soon.
BC, we saw USC have a lot of success running counters, running kind of trap action against Nebraska, doing the same thing we've seen other teams do, utilizing making Nebraska pay for when they over pursue. What have we heard about Nebraska's run defense as of late? How do you feel going into this matchup against Wisconsin?
I feel better about it because I don't think Wisconsin's going to have. Woody Marks to me was really good.
Really good. He's really good. We talked about it on that HypeCast last week.
Yeah.
I mean, he was.
Yeah.
I knew going in he was going to be a handful. I didn't think he'd have that, but he's good.
Yeah. I know Wisconsin's got good backs and all that, that can make you pay if you give them space. But I think Woody Marks is probably a little bit beyond what Wisconsin brings. So that'll help. I think the fact that, last year, if you think about the game in Madison, Mordecai killed them with his feet. And that's why this week Rule said actually Phil Longo and that how they used the QB run game last year was one of their toughest game plans, and kind of got Nebraska with that, especially late in an overtime. So I think if that's not a big factor this time, that's going to help Nebraska a lot too, where if you don't feel like the QB can run as much. The one thing to watch, though, Nash Hutmaker's been playing with a bad knee. And I mean, it's just worth noting
Since Sean Singleton took him out on the run against Indiana.
Yeah, I can't. And then I think UCLA got banged up some more. He was limping off the field. And so he's been going out there and hasn't been making a thing about it. But I don't think we're seeing Nash even close to 100% now. And so you do have to factor that into the equation when you talk about the run defense. And so it's going to take you're going to have to. Keona Davis has shown signs, I think, the last week of you're seeing his growth. And so he might have to give you some good reps. You wonder if, is this the week Riley Van Poppel pops up for his 4th game, or do you use that against Iowa? All those things are little storylines, the game within the game to watch, I think, when it comes to that.
Happer, we haven't had a chance to talk with you all season. Has there been a defensive player? So last year, there's a big preamble for me to interrupt myself. But last year, we saw multiple Nebraska players kind of emerge on defense and have strong seasons that maybe didn't come from nowhere, but it sort of announced themselves as someone to know going forward. This year, as you look at Nebraska's defense, while it's mostly a veteran group, has there been a younger guy that has stepped forward that you think is playing particularly good football, or someone that you're excited to see return next year as part of this defense?
Well, I mean, you could throw Sierra Wright, I suppose, into that category. I mean, that's been a pretty awesome revelation this year for Nebraska. Although not particularly a young guy, but he's made some plays and I think should be a stalwart back there. It's kind of the guy we thought it was going to be. Shavers has been pretty good in I guess limited opportunities, but he's had these flash plays this year, which is pretty much exactly what you want to see as from a freshman. Comes in, gets some limited opportunities in different situations, and just every once in a while just kind of flashes a little bit. So I think that's sort of on track for me. They've rotated not as much on the defensive line, this year, which has sort of been disappointing to see. This is something that you and I, Schaefer, have talked about before. Like that was definitely the big positive with last year, even though it ended in such a bad way. You got all this, development from young players who you had just brought into the program. And the two I always mentioned are Princewell and Cam Lenhart. And I like those guys. I don't know if there's been a jump from them this year that you would expect, mostly because of limited opportunity. So that's been tough this year. They haven't quite played as many people as I thought they were going to. They've really leaned into those older guys, especially as you guys talked about in the defensive backfield. And so that's sort of been disappointing, but there's definitely a few bright spots. And I do think there's still like development happening behind the scenes. It's just, you don't have that real game experience to know. Coaches say that all the time, right? You don't really know until they go in the games and then So not as much as you would hope. That'd be my answer to the question. Not as much as you would hope.
Predictions time. All right, let's get the oddly specific prediction going here. I will start. Nebraska's last 2 games, they have had at least one drive where they have allowed over 7 minutes to the other team in the same quarter. My oddly specific prediction, Wisconsin's longest drive of the game will be 4 minutes, 41 seconds. It'll encompass 9 plays, and they will kick a field goal at the end.
Wow. That's short by many standards of Nebraska football's defense over the last couple of games.
They're able to get to the 3rd down and force a field goal. It's a short field too. It's not like they're going the full field on it either. So that's what I got for you. Brunt.
Well, on the heels of last week's Sierra Wright choice for the oddly specific prediction, nailed. The mentions were on fire, guys. It was like within 30 seconds of Sierra Wright housing that play. It was just like pew, 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 just notification after notification. And even Josh Peterson of 1620 The Zone, trying to point out correctly, by the way, that I didn't say he would return it very far. I still count that as a win. So I think we get another solid game from kicker John Hull. Connor Happer has assured me that the wind is not going to be too crazy. Before we turned on the cameras, I saw him throwing some grass in the air just to test it. But I think we get 3 field goals from Hull. You're going to get a 38-yarder. You're going to get like a 25-yarder where you're going to be pretty pissed off that Nebraska wasn't able to get the ball in the end zone.
Mm-hmm.
But we all know that's just who they are at this point.
You count on one of those a game. Yeah.
I think we get a 51-yarder from John Hull in this game. I think we get a long one. So 3 field goals from John Hull, and that would be 8 straight for him. He goes 3 for 3 against Wisconsin on Saturday, saving Nebraska's bacon when they can't punch in touchdowns once again.
Will they have to pipe in Gus Johnson's voice?
Yes.
John Hull.
Yes.
This guy's excited about John Hull. I get it. It's fun.
BC.
This is the week it happens where a running back, Emmett Johnson in this case, gets to that second level, and he is able to get his shoelaces over that arm and keep going, keep his feet, and run for a 56-yard touchdown. The explosive.
Longest run of the year.
Yeah, rushing touchdown. And it'll be which fullback was it that had the run against Wisconsin and the Riley?
Janovich.
Yeah, it was Jano. If I had 22 Janos, man.
Be all right.
Yeah. So the Emmett Johnson 56-yard touchdown run. I'll throw one more in there. Javen Wright's going to close the door. This is telling you who I'm going to pick to win with a pick. You know, they had the play against USC where it's up off his helmet. Everything doesn't go his way. He closes the door in this one with an interception.
Okay. When you started that, I thought you were going to go back to the well of Nebraska's going to block a punt.
No,
that's where you were going.
I've given up on that dream. Yeah,
they came so close twice on Saturday,
which means they probably will now.
Yeah, Happer.
All right, so Jalen Lloyd is the subject of my oddly specific prediction this week. Jalen Lloyd, it may surprise you that he has had nearly double the catches this year that he had last year. We expected him to take a step forward this year. Hasn't necessarily been there consistently. Came up with a huge catch on the sideline to get Nebraska in position against USC. You will finally again see the Jalen Lloyd of last year when he was the Marvin Harrison Jr. of Nebraska, and he will catch. And he's done this once this year. He had a 60-yard catch, I think, in the Northern Iowa game. And yeah, that feels like it was 100 years ago. 59-yard catch in the Northern Iowa game. Jalen Lloyd will catch a long touchdown pass in this game that will take a 52-yard throw from Dylan Raiola. They will dial up a Jalen Lloyd 52-yard touchdown pass in this game.
Does the ball travel into the end zone in the air, or does Lloyd catch it short of the end zone and finish it by running it in?
Just short. I'm imagining just short of the goal line. Like it's put up there.
He catches it like the 3.
Yeah, it's almost like the one he had where it was like totally thrown behind him and he had to come back for it in the end zone this year. I guess that would have been in the
UCLA game.
Yeah, it felt like it was earlier in the season. Maybe he's in the Illinois game. It was a game that I was at. He had to come back for the ball. Whatever it was. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm imagining. He's out of the slot. He runs he angles up the field and Dylan's got him. He just has to throw it to him, right? That's the key. Throw it to him. He might not look open, but throw it to him. He's going to go and make the catch.
All right. Pick to click. We'll go reverse order. Happer.
So Jalen Lloyd could obviously be a pick to click here. Or I could reverse this. So I was toying around with the idea that we might see an appearance from our beloved friends, the Zebras, the Stripes, on Saturday, and we might hear something called that we have never heard called. This game has got weird written all over it. Two teams that are in an odd spot. So maybe our pick to click is the Zebras on the microphone. They're going to be talking about some penalty that you've never heard of before. But if I had to go with a real player, I think this has got a good Dylan Raiola game written all over it. That feels like cheating to me. But you pick the quarterback to have a good game, but he hasn't had good games recently. I think they get him going a little bit. We see a confident version of him on Saturday, and he continues to dig himself out of that hole.
BC.
This is a cheating one too, but it feels right because it's his last home game, and no one to me is the face of having to talk about tough losses more than Ty Robinson. Like, I picture him, and Brunson and I were talking about this on the trip too. Like, he was in the post game, and just he's had to always be kind of the guy who explains where they just fell short. I think he's going to have a dominant final game, and he's going to have a happy post game. He's the guy I think of, like, for this game. Like, if people are waking up and they're like, I'm not fired up about it on Saturday morning, you got to think of a guy like him and like how much like you put into try to get to this win. It might not be much to a lot of people, but they got to get this thing. And I think of him. So I'll say he has a big game.
Brunt.
I was going to go with Ty Robinson. I didn't have a second one prepared. So this is.
Do you want me to go? So
no, I got one. I can think on my feet. I think Jamari Butler. You've seen flashes of it. I think he's been more injured this year than maybe what Nebraska's really said, and kind of grinded through it. Sounds like he's going to be back next year. I think this is going to be the game where he makes a couple flash plays, and you kind of get a little bit excited about what that's going to look like in 2025. So I think teams are having to pay more attention to Ty Robinson. I think that frees things up for Jamari Butler. So I think he has a good game against Wisconsin, especially rushing the passer.
Maybe I'm just manifesting this to happen, but I am going to go with Janiran Bonner as my pick to click. I would like to see him on the field more. I would like to see Nebraska utilize him more. And I think we see him in the end zone on Saturday, a receiving touchdown, Janiran Bonner.
Janiran Bonner, the fullback?
Janiran Bonner, the utility football player. You can line him up at fullback, tight end, wide receiver. He's kicking someone's ass. You just don't want it to be yours.
Nice.
All right. Let's dive into the game predictions. BC already kind of hinted where he's going to go, so we're going to start with him.
All right. Yeah, that was some tough guy talk by you about Bonner.
Yeah,
man,
he's tough. I'm not tough. I'm not tough at all. Bonner's a tough one.
Yeah, you're right. I'll say Nebraska 20, Wisconsin 15. 15's how many they scored last time they're in Lincoln in a 15-14 Badger win. Nebraska gets their first victory over the Badgers since, 2012? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Unfreaking believable.
How many times do you think have you, in doing these and predictions in Wisconsin, Nebraska games, how many times do you think you've picked Nebraska to win the game and they haven't during this losing streak? It's a question for the group. Anybody?
Half.
Yeah, probably about half.
I definitely probably think I picked him since 2021. I mean, I think like basically since that game, because even that one, maybe not that year, because that was things had gone bad for Nebraska by the time that game rolled around. But I know I took him in 22. I know I took Nebraska in 23. I'll just go ahead and get it out of the way. I'll take Nebraska on Saturday with a 27-point performance. Nebraska 27, Wisconsin 19.
You guys
Why
love
19
scores on this show, don't you?
So does college football.
Yeah.
College football loves weird scores.
Yeah.
All right. Nebraska 27, Wisconsin 19. This Wisconsin team isn't good. We don't have to pretend like they're good. We know Nebraska's not great. I think they're the more talented team. It's senior day in Lincoln. They show up, they play a full game, they win the game, and they beat Wisconsin. Brunt.
Well, keeping in mind my 3 John Hole field goals, I've got Nebraska 23. I've got Wisconsin 17.
Look at this.
I think we're going to need a late stop. Kind of in the vein of what Brian was saying with Wright. Maybe a pick or something like that. So 23-17 Nebraska, and I would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the 10-year anniversary already of the Melvin Gordon game. We just missed out on that. So, but 23-17 Nebraska at home on Senior Day.
Pretty sure that Nebraska led 17-3 in the Melvin Gordon game before things started to go terrible.
They did.
Hallmark of the Bo Pelini era. Getting your ass kicked while also leading by double digits in the first quarter.
Amir did the downward W at the Wisconsin student section. I remember that.
Happer, take it home. Are you going to be like the rest of us Kool-Aid drinkers, or are you going to think for yourself?
No, I am. I'm with the Kool-Aid drinkers. Nebraska's lost 10 in a row in this series. Doesn't bother me one bit. Nebraska 27, Wisconsin 21. I love the 27, Schaefer. I'm with you there. The question is, does Nebraska have to win it with a defensive stand, or do they have to go down the field and drive it to take the lead and win the football game at some point? Like, they're going to have to score 27 points, so they're going to have to do that at some point. I'm going to say the defense does get the job done at the end of the day. They prevent Wisconsin from taking what would be a 1-point lead in the latter minutes of that football game, and they beat them for the first time since they wore those idiotic looking uniforms in September of 2012 with the N and the W on
Great
the front.
alternates.
And then I could stop talking about that game forever and ever and ever. That'd be great.
That was a cool game, though. It was the way they got it going downhill in the second half. You know what would have been one of the coolest moments in the stadium? Remember how that game ended where the Wisconsin had the fumble? It never got a Monty ball. Harvey Jackson or someone had a chance. He almost kept his feet. If he would have picked it up, he would have been running right to the student section. I always thought that would have been one of the great mosh pits in Memorial Stadium.
It was a night game. It was a great game.
Yeah. The uniforms were on point. I don't know what you're talking about. give me the Whataburger W. If you're going to wear stupid uniforms, just go all the way stupid. And that's what they accomplished in that game.
Bad take, Schaefer. Bad take.
It's a great take. It's a great one. All right. Connor Happer, thank you again for filling in, or not filling in really, but being a guest here on the Husker 24/7 HypeCast. We'll contact you again next year. And you can pick your game. You can just say, maybe you want the Cincinnati game at Arrowhead. Maybe that's what you want next year.
Yeah. And the Royals will be right in the middle of another playoff chase. And, we can all travel down there and have a fun time getting ready for the season opener at Arrowhead. Please let me get that game. I'll take it.
Are you wearing a Royals jersey right now?
Go Royals. Yeah. We're looking
365 days a year for this man.
We're looking into Jonathan India and Alec Boehm, Brady Singer. We're dangling him out there. I don't know what's going to happen. Probably nothing.
All right. Michael Bruns, Brian Christopherson. Appreciate you guys as always. For those two, for Connor Happer, I'm Mike Schaefer. We're Husker 24/7, and we will be back with more Husker 24/7 content later this week.